Hey, welcome to Crosspoint, friends. I'm Eric, and I'm so excited that you're tuning in with us today as we kick off our annual series, At the Movies. This is the 11th year we've taken a look at the biggest movies of the year and the spiritual fibers that weave in, around, and through each of them. We're excited to dive in this weekend to the hottest movie on the big screen, Barbie. It's too bad there hasn't been any hype or promotion of this film. Otherwise, people would know about it. Before we do that, we just want to take a second to say thanks for spending a little time with us today. If you've joined us before, welcome back. And if this is your first time with us, we certainly hope it's the first of many. We built this place for people who may have given up on church, but haven't given up on God. And if that's you, we're especially grateful that you've decided to be with us today. Now, the cool part about joining us during the At the Movies 11 series, if this is your first time with us, you've got some free movie tickets coming your way. And here's how you can get them. If you scan this QR code or fill out the digital connection card next to the stream and let us know your preference of movie tickets at a real theater, or if you prefer a digital platform, be sure to share your email and mailing address with us. We'll drop it in the mail this week, simply as our way of saying thank you for joining us today at Crosspoint. And if somebody invited you, we would love to know who they are so we can go to their house and not know. So we can send them movie tickets as well. That's what we're going to do. Now, before we dive into the Barbie movie, there are some amazing events this weekend and over the next couple of weeks that we do not want you to miss. So here are the top 3 things you need to know this week. First, today is Move Up Weekend at Crosspoint in all of our kids and student environments. Not only will kids be promoted to new environments this weekend, there's also going to be fun in store for all ages. In fact, we want to invite you to join us today, August 6th, for the Back to School Bash from 11:30 to 1, if you're watching this on Monday. But it's going to be right here in the Crosspoint parking lot with lots of inflatables, free Kona ice, games, tie-dye, food, and fun for all ages and families. For those of you who are joining us online from the greater North Side Indy area, we invite you to head over and join us for all the fun. Number 2, here's a cool opportunity to change a life. On Thursday, August 10th, we're going to be hosting a blood drive between 4:30 and 7:30 p.m. right here on the Crosspoint campus. This is a quick, easy way to make a real difference in our community. Scan the QR code to sign up, and you can change a life by giving life here in the Crosspoint parking lot. Just one donation can save up to 3 lives. And finally, Crosspoint Student Ministry, CSM, is kicking off the school year with an amazing event called The Chase. I'm telling you, 7th through 12th grade students are not going to want to miss this. Students are going to be divided up into 2 teams for a multi-week competition filled with fun challenges and opportunities to make new friends, plus relevant messages from dynamic speakers. Each week is designed to be an easy entry point for new students, including incoming 7th graders. All right, we've got a great service for you today. If you're a Barbie fan, get your pink on. You're going to love this. And if you're not a Barbie fan, we think you're going to love this as well. So let's head to the big screen and take a look at the trailer for this weekend's movie.
Hey, Barbie. Can I come to your house tonight?
Sure. I don't have anything big planned, just a giant blowout party with all the Barbies and planned choreography and a bespoke song. You should stop by.
So cool.
You can find me under the lights, diamonds under my eyes.
This is the best day ever.
It is the best day ever. So is yesterday, and so is tomorrow, and every day from now until forever. Do you guys ever think about dying?
When my heart breaks,
Some things have been happening that might be related.
when my world shakes.
Cold shower, falling off my roof, and my heels are on the ground. What do I have to do?
You have to go.
To the real world.
You can go back to your regular life, or you can know the truth about the universe. The choice is now yours.
The first one, the high heel.
You have to want to know, okay? Do it again.
Closer I am to find. Closer I am to find.
I'm coming with you.
Okay. Wow, this is the real world. What's going on? Why are these men looking at me?
Yeah, they're also staring at me.
in the real world. That's impossible.
If this got out, this could mean extremely weird things for our world. This would be catastrophic!
We haven't played with Barbie since we were like 5 years old. Oh.
No one rests until this doll is back in a box.
Even if nobody else sings along.
Humans only have one ending.
Get that Barbie!
Ideas live forever.
No, I won't let you do just one appendectomy,
But I'm a man.
but not a doctor.
Can I talk to a doctor?
You are talking to a doctor.
And I need a clicky pen?
No.
A sharp thing?
No.
There he is. Doctor!
Somebody get security.
I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world. Life in plastic, it's fantastic.
All right, who's excited about Barbie this weekend? Come on. Man, I tell you what, this is one of our favorite series every year as we dive into At the Movies 11 and look at some of the spiritual connects, some of the things that these movies raise for us. And so super excited you're here with us this weekend. My name's Curt, if we haven't met. And let's make some noise for those tuning in online this weekend across our online space, our city, our state, our nation. So excited to have you with us. If you're tuning in online for the first time or in the room for the first time, as you heard earlier, you've got free movie tickets coming your way. So if you didn't connect with the digital connection card, here's the QR code again. Just let us know your name, at least your email, and you will have those free movie tickets coming your way this weekend. All right, we're going to look at the biggest movie of the year, and just a quick straw poll. How many of us are willing to admit we've seen the Barbie movie so far? Oh, awesome. Look at that. Yes. Quick story. When our family, when it first came out, my daughters and my wife went to the movie together, and then my son went with all of his guy friends, and I'm left out. And they're like, Dad, you got to do this movie. And so I'm like, so I'm going to be the loser dad, the 50-year-old guy, creepy guy, walking into the Barbie movie by himself. And my girls and my wife rescued me, and they went with me, and actually really, really enjoyed it. And so if you have not seen this movie, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I want to give you kind of a quick backdrop for it. So these Barbie dolls, Barbie Land is where Barbie and this wide range of fellow Barbies, where they all reside. And it's a matriarchal society, and so, you know, they're self-confident, they're self-reliant, there's a sense of self-sufficiency, and all the Barbies have important jobs and positions, just like the dolls have through the years. I mean, you can be a doctor, you can be a nurse, you can be, you know, an astronaut, you can be a teacher, you can be a writer, you can be a construction worker. I mean, just the wide range. And, of course, there's the stereotypical Barbie. And the whole point of this, which is really kind of fascinating that comes out in the movie, is when the Barbie line was created, I mean, Barbie's goal was to inspire young girls, to help them see in a very patriarchal culture where men kind of ran things that, hey, girls, you can actually be anyone you want to be. You can actually be the person you were created to be. And as a father of 3 daughters, I just have to tell you, man, I love the equity. I like the empowerment that this movie brings about. Now, Ken, on the other hand, you guys like the sweatshirt, by the way, like the I am Knuff. And come on, you know, like a hoodie, isn't a hoodie supposed to be like worn like with the hood? I mean, isn't this like really the way it's supposed to go? Well, you know, Ken, he's on his own self-awareness journey. And of course, Ken, he part of his issue is he's like, I don't have an identity outside of Barbie because it's always, you know, Barbie and Ken. It's not just like Ken. And so he's on this journey himself. And at one point, you know, somebody says, hey, Ken, what do you do, you know, for a living? He's like, beach, right? Like he said, no, they're like, no, like, what do you do? He's like, I beach. And so he just pretty much does recreation for his life. And so, you know, he's trying to figure out the deeper meanings of life as well. And so in this Barbie land utopia, I mean, everything's perfect. Every day is the best day ever, which sounds great. But, you know, Barbie always has the right attitude, always looks great, always sounds great, is successful every day. And one day she, you know, comes into kind of a crisis, if you will, and discovers that, gosh, there must be a little more to life than perhaps what I've been experiencing. And this causes her to ask some deeper questions about purpose. And she begins to dig into this question, okay, what was I made for? Which I think is a question that honestly we all probably can relate to. And so we're going to dig into this question this weekend, and we're going to kind of take a look at what God says about some of these things, because some of the things Barbie experiences actually fall into the narrative of what God is doing in the world as well. So first thing, 3 things we're going to look at today. Number 1, you and I, we're actually made to feel. It's one of the things that's really big for Barbie. She's a plastic doll in a Barbie world, and she wants to begin to feel what it is like to be real, to be human. And let's be honest, you and I mean, even though we have the capacity to feel, there are a lot of things that get in the way of our ability to feel, to experience the things that we want to experience, whether that's, fears that we have and we end up isolating and insulating our lives and we want to do everything possible to never have to feel certain things, or perhaps you've experienced a lot of pain, a lot of brokenness, a lot of woundedness, and so we just naturally begin to build up calluses that again cause us not to be able to feel. In fact, let me ask you this question. When was the last time that you really felt alive? When was the last time that you're like, man, that moment right there, I was really alive in that moment right there. Barbie, she wants to feel alive. Now, this is where Jesus kind of comes into the scene for us, because, Jesus, when he first came on the scene, in human life, he declares as he starts his ministry, why he's here. And he's really kind of clear on what he's here for. In fact, in John, the Gospel of John, chapter 10, he says, I have come. And of course, we have all these ways we typically want to fill this in. Jesus came to make us feel guilty, to make us feel like really terrible, horrible people who are dirty and sinful. And, Jesus came to, make us, feel like a lesser of a person. All these things that sometimes we equate with spirituality. But Jesus is like, that's not at all what I came for. He actually said, I have come in order that you might have life. And not only life, but life in all of its fullness. You know what that means? That means that, Jesus came so you could feel. Jesus came to allow you to feel fully alive. When is the last time that you could say, in those moments, I just felt like I was fully alive? A couple weeks ago, I took my daughter down to a cross-country practice. She runs for the cross-country team across the street at Hamilton Southeastern High School. And on Tuesdays, they do destination practices at different locations across the city. And this particular Tuesday, they were running down at Butler University, starting at Hinkle Fieldhouse. And so I have a couple kids that attend Butler, so I'm like, I'll drive down with you, 7 o'clock in the morning. And she goes off on her run, and I decided to go on my own run that morning around campus and just, get a run in while she's off at practice. And I just experienced something I've not really experienced before. As I'm beginning to run through the campus, I find myself just overcome with emotion. And I don't know if it was just because the day was like one of those perfect mornings where, the air's crisp and the sun's just like shooting over the horizon and everything's vibrant. It's just one of those picturesque mornings. I don't know if that's what caused me to just feel so fully alive. I don't know if it's because I was in the midst of this rest and study break that I take every summer, where I get the chance to disconnect for 3 or 4 weeks from work. And during that season, as I kind of decompress, I actually really begin to feel a sense of like full humanness and kind of restoring and recharging the batteries. I don't know if that was it. But I found myself running past certain buildings, and these memories just began to overcome me. In fact, I ran by the parking garage where we parked each time we dropped each of our kids off for the very first time at campus, and I just had this overwhelming pit in my stomach, almost and literally like tears in my eyes. See, this is one of the things, if you've not sent kids to college, they don't prepare you for this as parents. I think the day you take your kid to college is one of the most gut-wrenching days ever, at least for me as a parent. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, but there's just a sense of I feel like you're ripping my heart out. And so as I was going by this parking garage, I was just remembering what it was like when we left our kids there for the first time. And then I go around the corner and I run into the dorm that each of my kids lived in their freshman year. And for my daughter, that was a really rough year. It was during the middle of COVID, and she was just dealing with a lot of stuff, and it was hard, and campus was hard. And I just remember at times dropping her off on the curb as she went back to campus for the week. And again, just being like, oh my gosh, I know she knows she needs to do this, but my heart breaks for her because it's so hard. And again, overcome just with that emotion. And then as I circled around and began to go down, sorority and fraternity row, I ran by the house that my son, joined this past year, and I went to the other end of the spectrum, and I just had this overwhelming sense of joy and happiness for, he found this community, he found his tribe on campus, and just how forming that has been. I ran a circle around that house, just like a prayer circle, praying for him and all the guys and his leadership role with that group this year. And then I had this moment where I went by a park bench where I remember sitting with my daughter and picking her up at the end of her her first year. And another moment where I remember picking my son up and going, oh my gosh, you guys made it, and the joy of you made it through the year. I mean, it was just back and forth. And at the end of the run, I mean, I just found myself overwhelmed with the sense of this place has been so forming and shaping for my kids. And I just sat down and began to, write a little bit about my experience. And when I got home, I told my wife, I said, Julie, I don't know what it is, but I felt more alive than I felt in a long time today. In fact, while I was still on campus, one of my friends texted me and did a quick check-in, and he said, hey, how's it going? And I texted him pretty much everything I just told you right here. And look at his response. He said, that's one of the most authentic texts I've received in a long, long time. So this is what happens when you get to that place where you're fully feeling and you feel like you're fully alive. One of the amazing things that the Barbie movie really kind of brings out, and Barbie, illustrates, is this insatiable desire that we have to feel alive. But it's not just in, the joy moments. I mean, there's feeling alive is also experiencing sometimes the pain and even the tears.
Everything is backwards here. Girls hate me.
Who are you?
Oh, and I keep getting arrested. I also just learned to cry. First I got one tear, and then I got a whole bunch.
You ever had that moment where you're like, you get one tear, like you're all of a sudden like, oh man, something impacted me. Then all of a sudden, like all the tears flow because you begin to feel like you're fully alive. And in those moments, you're like, man, there's something about that moment. We want that. We long for that. You're actually created for that. You're made to feel. Second thing we see that kind of lifts out of this movie is that we are made to embrace our humanness. See, Barbie, she actually wants to know what it's like to live in the real world. Now, it's fascinating because you and I, we actually oftentimes feel like our humanness gets in the way of our ability to really live a full life. And as opposed to like leaning into it, actually revealing our uniqueness. See, for Barbie, she has a moment where she experiences a crisis and she begins to feel for the first time. She begins to actually feel things that human beings feel for the first time. And it's front and center in this scene right here. Take a look at this.
Under the lights, diamonds under my eyes.
This is the best day ever.
It is the best day ever. So is yesterday, and so is tomorrow, and every day from now until forever. Do you guys ever think about dying?
When my heart breaks,
Some things have been happening that might be related.
when my world shakes.
Cold shower, falling off my roof, and my heels are on the ground.
See, this is one of those moments where for the first time, Barbie experiences what it's like to be less than perfect. To actually not be in the deal where things are actually going the way that I want, where I always look the way that I want, where I have flat feet, God forbid. I mean, all the things that sometimes we think, man, if I could just have these things. But she's like, it actually reveals a bit of her humanness. She doesn't know what to do with it other than to embrace it. But of course, her whole world, where everything's exactly the way it should be and perfect, they don't know what to do with this. In fact, there's a fascinating article in Psychology Today that talks about how the Barbie movie actually does a lot in revealing our human development. Here's what they said. They said, Barbie's identity crisis actually serves as a rite of passage in the quest toward her authentic self. See, this is what moments like this do, and it's actually a part of our humanness. Last weekend, we heard from an amazing woman. Did you guys enjoy Ann Smith last weekend? Those of you who are here, my word, I tell you what. Ann's amazing. If you didn't have a chance to hear Ann or hear for the first time, you can go to crosspointweb.org/watch. You can check out our previous weekends. She's a 98-year-old woman who just wisdom just flows out of her. It's just amazing. And my wife and I had the chance to go up and spend a good part of an afternoon with her last week, and she said something that just kind of blew me away. She said, Curt, we are spiritual beings, and Jesus came to teach us what it's like to be human. Which is so crazy because oftentimes we think the opposite. We think, well, we're human, and we've got to learn how to be spiritual. But if we're created in the image of God and we are divine image bearers, meaning God has actually built his character and some of his DNA into us, this means that we are spiritual beings and that Jesus, as Ann says, I think she's right, did come to teach us what it means to be human. See, Barbie wanted to know what it was like to be human. And see, Jesus, he comes and he shows people what it's like. He's constantly, through interaction after interaction after interaction, he's showing people actually what it means to just be a human being. In fact, there's one day where he was teaching in the temple and he had the Pharisees and the teachers of the law with him, and they dragged this woman in front of everybody who, let's just say, this was probably not one of the brighter moments in her life, and her life didn't look like anything like she had expected it to at that point. And she'd done some things to kind of mess her life up. And if you grew up in church, you've likely heard this story. In fact, if you didn't grow up around church, you probably have still heard this story. She'd been accused in front of all these people and these leaders, these spiritual leaders, of adultery. And she'd messed up her marriage. She'd messed up another marriage. And, she destroyed her reputation because everybody now knows exactly what she did. And they made a display of it. And they know who she is. And after this conversation with her accusers, Jesus just stands up and he looks at this woman who's totally messed up her life, and he says, hey, look at me. He says, look at me. And if you picture this in your mind, you can imagine she probably had a hard time looking at him because of the shame she felt because of that moment. And take a look at this fascinating collection of words that he puts together right here. He says, hey, listen, look at me. I do not condemn you. He says, in other words, I'm not going to sentence you. I'm not going to sentence you to at least what these religious leaders say you deserve. He says, look at me. I just want you to leave your life of sin. Now, we're going to come back to what that means here in just a moment. Another day, Jesus is walking along through a crowd, and he looks up and sees a tax collector in the tree, and he'd never seen a tax collector in the tree before, not something you see every day. And so the text doesn't tell us this. This is in the Gospel of Luke. Luke's writing this down. Luke's the one who says, hey, I've talked to eyewitnesses. I've done the research. I've tried to put an orderly account together of what took place when Jesus was on the ground here in the first century. So everybody who comes behind me, which is like you and I, so everybody will know exactly what took place. And so he doesn't actually write this into the text, but I think at the bottom of that tree were Zacchaeus' bodyguards, because he would have needed bodyguards. Because see, this is a guy who totally fouled up his life. He was fouling up other people's lives. He wasn't a human being. He was like a monster. He didn't know what it meant to be human. I mean, this is a guy who had taken a job as a tax collector, which in that particular culture, this was like one of the most despised professions. We don't know why he was a tax collector. We don't know if he chose the job. We don't know if he had grown up and his dad was a tax collector and he just kind of following his dad's footsteps. We don't know if he'd kind of been shaped for this and told, hey, one day here's what you're going to be. And so he didn't know anything else. We don't really know how he ended up here. All we know is that he's creating all kinds of pain and problems in his life, and he's creating all kinds of pain and problems in everybody else's life. Because not only was it his responsibility to collect the heavy, heavy taxes for the Roman government from the people, but he also could add on whatever he wanted. And so he would actually take advantage and enrich himself by collecting exorbitant amounts of money over and beyond the taxes, by padding his pockets, by taking from these hardworking people. And he was despised. I mean, people hated him, and there was no way forward for him. He couldn't see any way forward. But on this particular day, for whatever reason, he wanted to be able to see Jesus. And so Jesus stops as he's walking along, and he sees this guy up in this tree, this kind of mess of a man, and he says to this man, he says, hey, come down, because we're going to go to your house today. Meaning, I want to come spend some time with you. And we don't know what happened behind closed doors. And we don't know what the conversation was once he and Zacchaeus and Jesus were at his house. I mean, but we know Jesus sat with this man who was kind of struggling with his spirituality and struggling with his humanity at the same time. And I have a feeling Jesus said something like what he often says to people. Hey, I want you to leave this. I want you to leave this life of sin. And here's this phrase again, meaning this isn't what I designed you for. Would you just follow me? Would you just, follow me and let me teach you what it's like to be human? And whatever took place in that setting, I mean, Zacchaeus comes out and he's like, oh my gosh, I can't just walk away from what I've been doing, but I've got to pay these people back. And not only have to pay these people back, I got to pay it back with interest. I mean, somewhere in that interaction, Zacchaeus discovers what it's like to be human. He discovers he's made in the image of God. He discovers what it means to have compassion, to become human and put other people's needs ahead of himself. Yet again, in another encounter, Jesus was traveling in an area of the country where he probably wasn't overly welcomed. He probably wasn't supposed to be there. He was a Jew in an area called Samaria. And the Jews and Samaritans didn't get along. And so, Jesus, he stopped at this well, and his team, his disciples, they kind of went on into the city, this little village named Sychar, to get some food. And as Jesus was standing at the well, it was like a blistering hot day. I mean, similar to like what, our Southwest. I mean, it's like being in Phoenix right now or out in Texas. I mean, it was just incredibly hot. I mean, in the middle of the day when nobody should be out, and yet here is this woman who shows up at this well because her life is a mess and she wants to show up when no one else is around. And she's been married 5 times, which honestly is a lot today, but like back then that was like really a lot. And the man she's living with at the moment isn't even her husband. And I mean, this woman had a long history of chasing after things, of thirsting for things, of longing for something more, but not knowing how to fill it. And she wanted to fill something, and she wanted that longing filled. And yet she was creating more of a mess instead of meaning in her life. And every time she tried to fix things, it actually just got worse. And so it's just her and Jesus standing there at the well, and she probably expected him to say nothing to her because, I mean, partly, number one, he's a Jew and she's a Samaritan, and that would just be like a game ender right there, like they don't really interact. But it's not just that. I mean, if Jesus knew what kind of mess she'd kind of made of her life, he probably wouldn't even have a reason to speak with her. At least that's what she would have thought. And yet Jesus says to this woman, he says, hey, come close to me. Hey, come close. And John tells us that he says to her, hey, whoever drinks the water that I bring, that I give, listen, you're never going to thirst again. Because see, she'd been trying to quench this thirst, this longing for meaning that was deep within herself, and she couldn't figure out how to do that. See, at each of these encounters, it's fascinating because, sometimes we look at these and it's easy to go, oh man, Jesus called them out. Jesus, he's like, hey, listen, I'm going to call you out for you. That's not the posture at all. I mean, there was no shame. That's not Jesus' intent. His spirit was actually not one of calling out. He was actually trying to teach them how to be human. I mean, these are like incredibly compassionate moments right here where he's teaching them. He's saying, hey, listen, part of being human is you don't have it all together. Part of being human is life is not going always to go the way you want it to go. Part of being human, you're not always going to do the right thing. Part of being human is that you're not always going to make the best choice. I want you to would you just leave your life of sin? Now, this is this phrase right here. What does that mean? Well, sin, we often associate dirty, dark, I'm horrible. That's not at all what Jesus intended this to. Sin is simply to miss the mark. What Jesus was saying to each of these individuals is, hey, listen, I made you for so much more than this. Would you just leave? You're going after something and listen, you're trying to quench something and you're missing what I actually made you for. And I hate seeing you have to continue to deal with it. I'm pretty sure you're probably feeling like you're hating some of the things that you're experiencing because of this. Look at me, look at me, look at me. Would you trust me enough to follow me and let me teach you because I've got something way better for you? See, Barbie, she just wants to be human. She wants to know what it's like to be human. One of our good friends, Audrey Weger, who is the CEO of Grace Horizon, which is one of our ministry partners that they have an organization up in Anderson. And Grace Horizon is really a survivor, a community of survivors, of women who are survivors, out of sexual exploitation, sex trafficking, human trafficking. And she has this posture of how they lead their organization that I just think is very resemblant, in fact, perfectly resemblant of the heart of God. She says, many times these women that we're serving, sometimes the decisions that these women are making are the best and most loving options available to them. When they're giving their bodies away, selling themselves, they're actually doing that in order to provide for the people around them. You and I look at that and go, oh my gosh, you could do that. She says, this is actually one of the most loving things they could do. Our goal as an organization is to help get them to a place where they have better options. Man, I'm like, this is exactly what Jesus is doing. He's teaching us. He's like, hey, sometimes the decisions we make, it's just the best options we have. He's like, I want to teach you what it's like to be human where you have better options. Jesus wants to teach us what it's like to be human. And then the third thing that really gets elevated in this movie, and listen, there are so many themes in this movie. I mean, I had a really hard time honing these in. The third thing I want to lift out today is that we're made to appreciate the beauty not only in others, but also in ourselves. You know, one of the really kind of standout moments in this film, and I'm not going to spoil this for you, but it's called the bench scene. There's a bench scene at Venice Beach in the movie where the director of the movie, Greta Gerwig, she actually talks about this in a recent article and how she had to actually fight for this moment to be kept in the movie because it doesn't have a lot to do with the plot, but it reveals this longing that Barbie has, this longing to know that she was made for more. And the director actually calls this the heart of the movie. And so here's kind of how this scene plays out. Greta talks about how Barbie, she is in this moment sitting on a bench, and she sees this woman who is actually a friend of the producer, of Greta Gerwig. It's Anne Roth, who's an Oscar-winning costumer. So she's won Oscars, and she says she is 91 years old. She was 91 when they filmed this movie. She's an amazing woman. She's a beautiful woman. She's a legend. I think she's one of the oldest individuals to ever win an Oscar. And here's what Greta says of this moment. She says, Barbie's sort of looking around at the world, and then she looks at her, meaning Anne Roth's character, and takes her in, and she's never seen aging before. Because see, in Barbie's world, everything's perfect. Everything's exactly the way you want it to be. Everything's always got elasticity to it. Nothing ever sags. She looks at this woman, and she's never seen somebody aged before, and she's struck by her, and Barbie says to her, "You're so beautiful." And Anne, the woman who plays this part, she says back to her, "I know it. I know it." And Greta says, such a wonderful moment in the movie. See, I think one of the reasons I love this scene is it reveals that when Barbie's confronted with the sight of an elderly woman who she's never seen before, where everything isn't exactly the way it used to be, she's not repulsed or frightened. She doesn't respond the way sometimes we do when things aren't the way they used to be or when we don't feel like we're maybe enough. And yet she looks at her and she says, "You're beautiful." And this lady responds and says, "Well, I know." And she sees this self-confidence and this sense of effortless self-affirmation. Let me ask you, what if you could wake up every single day with that kind of confidence? That who you are, God shaped you. He formed you into the masterpiece that you are, and you're exactly what He designed you to be. Doesn't mean we don't have room for growth. Doesn't mean we don't have places where we continue to pursue and excel and develop. But what if we just say all the things that I think are wrong with? What if maybe God said, you're enough? What if we're actually able to live celebrating that beauty, not only in ourselves, but also seeing that in others? Which is a dominant theme that comes out of this movie. You know, there's a guy in the Old Testament by the name of David who was a king. He was a warrior. Maybe you've heard of him before. You know, he's a guy who writes a good portion of some books in the Old Testament. And we have access to David's prayer journal, which we find in the Psalms. And David's a guy who was a king, he's a warrior, he's also a poet and a musician and a writer. He's like all these things, and yet David at the same time, he's got some brokenness in his life. As much as he recognizes, God made me as a masterpiece and I uniquely bring things into the world, he had some broken moments and some moments where he missteps, an affair with a woman who obviously wasn't his wife, and it ruined their marriage, and David actually killed her husband, and they had a child. A lot of just difficulty. And yet, even in the midst of all of that, he actually writes about this masterpiece, this beauty that he is able to still embrace in himself. In fact, here's what he says. He says, "Oh yes, you shaped me. First inside and then out, you formed me in my mother's womb. I thank you, high God. You're breathtaking." He says, "Body and soul are marvelously made. I worship and adoration." Man, what a creation. What a creation you made in me. What a beautiful creation you made in me, even with all my flaws. Like an open book, you watched me grow from conception to birth. All the stages of my life you know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I was made, bit by bit, how I was sculpted from nothing into something. Like an open book, you watched me. You watched me grow from conception to birth. All the stages of my life were spread out before you. All the days of my life prepared before I'd even lived one day. Man, did you know that's how God sees you right there? I mean, that's how he sees you right there. I mean, what if, as we watch this movie and we think about some things that get lifted out from something that we've known in our culture for years, but what if some of these spiritual principles, what if we could live with that kind of adoration and beauty, not only of ourselves, but of others? What if you could wake up every single morning, think about this, every single morning, with that kind of confidence about yourself?
What was I made for? Taking a drive, I was an idea, looked so alive. Turns out I'm not real, just something you paid for. What was I made for? Someday I might. Someday I might. When did it end? All the enjoyment. I'm sad. something I'm made for.
I think this is why we're drawn to movies on the big screen, because we see these stories play out. And we see these narratives and it inspires us. It taps into something deep in our soul that we long for, because in many cases, I mean, many of these themes, there's a mirroring of the same kind of activity that God is doing in our world and desires to do in our lives. I mean, Jesus came to teach spiritual people what it was like to be human. That's all Barbie wanted. She just wanted to be human. She wanted to know what it is like to really, really live. A couple weeks ago, my wife and I invited some of our old neighbors over from some of our early days at Cross Point. When we first moved into the community, one by one, we began to get connected with some of our neighbors. One by one, they began joining this community. And you know, our kids would play outside. We'd spend time with them in the backyard. I mean, and you know, every now and then somebody would move in. They're like, "Hey, we're here. Everybody goes to this church, and it's called Cross Point. There's a pastor apparently lives around here somewhere." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." And there's no, you know, there's no stiff hand or heavy hand. It was just, they were like, "Hey, we see what you guys are doing. You eat together. You share life together. How do I become a part of that?" And you know, over the years, I mean, it just continued to grow and expand. And you know, now 10, 12 years later, I mean, our kids are grown and life looks different. And all the people that were on our patio are still a part of this place, you know, serving, making things happen. I mean, it was one of those, again, one of those nights that, I don't know, it was just one of those nights where I felt like I was fully alive. I said to my wife, that was one of the most thoroughly enjoyable evenings I've had in a long time. And again, I don't know if it was the beauty of the evening. I don't know if it was the great beverages and appetizers and the laughter. I don't fully know what created that. I think to some degree there's a feeling of, oh my gosh, God, these people all represent what you have continued to do, you know, through this place. And every one of these families are changed, and their adult kids came. I mean, nearly every family's adult kids that didn't have to come came and were part of this. And I'm like, all of these people's lives have been touched because of what you do, God. And I think, though, what made it perhaps most amazing was, again, wasn't just sharing the joys and the laughter, but as I looked around that circle, I realized, man, we've got a number of cancer stories in this circle. People that have fought through some dire moments in some cases. We've got in this circle some marriage wins that began as struggles and didn't know if marriages would last, and my wife and I included have gone through some of those. As I look around that circle, man, there are a number of us that have dealt with some pretty strong headwinds on the mental health front. A number in that circle that have, at different seasons over the years, gone through job loss, and this community has been a part of just walking alongside. And I'm like, I think what made maybe this so rich was that it's not just the joys, and it's the pain, sometimes the tears, it's all of those things that create the beauty. And that's what we long for. We long to be a part of that. Because we're made to feel, we're made to embrace our humanness, we're created to see the beauty in ourselves, but also in others. As you've been sitting here today, as you've been sitting at home, I just want you to ask you, where's God been speaking to me? What's God perhaps been stirring my heart on? Are you longing to feel again? Do you just have a desire to say, man, I want to know what it's like to really feel alive? Maybe I forgot what it's like. Maybe I forgot what it's like to be joyful, to be happy. You know, God can do that today. He can begin to restore that. Perhaps you feel like your humanness has actually disqualified you as opposed to grown you, and you just think, oh, there's no way God's grace could ever find its way to me. Well, it's actually quite the opposite. Jesus came to teach us what it's like to be human, and all of our frailties and all of our failings and the moments where life isn't exactly or at all the way we desired it to be. Again, God can begin to restore, renew right now, today. Perhaps it's for you just embracing the greatness within you, the beauty within you. Maybe you have a hard time recognizing that God actually created you with value and worth. Maybe it's recognizing that value and worth in those around you, which starts actually with you appreciating that in you. I want to pray for us and just ask God to bring us whatever we need. Because Jesus came. He came so that we could actually live a full life, fully alive. That's what he came for. And he wants to help us do that. So let's pray together. Heavenly Father, thank you for your incredible plan. I mean, your incredible goodness, your desire to yourself come out of the heavenlies and become human, and to send Jesus to actually teach these beings, spiritual beings that struggle at times to understand what it means to be human, what it means to really live, what it means to embrace the moments where maybe not fully the person we want to be or the person we wanted to be, or that don't always make the decisions that we want, or just can't see the value in ourselves. God, I just pray that right now, whatever it is that we need from you right now, that you would uniquely intersect with our lives and our minds, and that would bring us what we need right now. God, I just pray that you would speak life and joy and hope to every single one of us. And Father, if we forgot what it means to be happy, to be joyful, God, would you restore that? Would you bring a fullness of life back to us? Maybe for the first time, we want to just take a step of saying, Jesus, I want to know what that's like. Would you help me experience that this week? And Father, we know that as you listen to our prayers, God, we know you will meet us exactly where we are. We thank you for your crazy, crazy grace, your crazy, crazy goodness, and for never giving up on us, so that we can be all that you created us to be. And we just pray these things according to your character, Jesus.
Think I forgot how to be happy. Something I'm not, something I can be, something I wait for, something I'm made for, something I'm made for.
I call you maker. You give life an eternal spark. I call you healer. You can mend any broken heart. I call you faithful Father. You finished everything you start. My soul was made to respond. I know you by 1,000 names, and you deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed at what you've done, and I am lost in wonder at all you do. I know you by 1,000 names. praise in the highest. Give him praise in the highest. He is worthy. Yes, he is worthy of all the praise. I'll praise you anyway. Oh, mountain, oh, valley, I know that you're with me there. I'll praise you anyway.
That's our hope for you today, that you would experience the goodness of God and that He would continue to reveal what you were made for. Now, if you took a next step today, you can let us know on your connection card. And if you made the choice today to take advantage of the goodness and grace that Jesus brings to us by taking that next step to trust Jesus as your Lord and Savior, we would love to celebrate that with you. So again, let us know on your connection card. If you'd like someone to pray with you today, simply text the keyword "need prayer" to 317-834-7373, and our prayer team will be in touch with you to pray with you. And for those of you who are givers, we just want to say thank you. You make all this possible here at Crosspoint through your generosity through the Joy Box. And if you want to become a giver, you can go ahead and hit the Give button at the top of the screen or crosspointweb.org/give. And know that when you do that, you are empowering the message and all the crazy goodness and hope that comes out of this place. I personally want to say thank you for doing that. Can't wait to see you next time at the movies. Have an incredible week.
Praise, give him praise, give him praise.